For 2 years, the cabin on Bitterroot Ridge stood finished and empty, and the men who passed it on the high trail called it the widower's folly, though Jed Mercer had never been married a day in his life. He had built it for a woman named Alice, who lived in a letter and a daguerreotype, and nowhere else anymore. He had cleared the land and raised the walls and hung a door with iron hinges he forged himself, and he had built, off the main room, a smaller room with a window facing the morning, because Alice had written once that she liked to take her coffee where she could watch the sun come up. He finished that room the week her last letter came. The letter said she had married a man in Ohio who could give her a settled life, and that she was sorry and that she hoped he would understand. Jed did not understand, but he stopped writing letters, and he moved into the big room and never once slept in the small one, and he let the cabin become the thing the trailmen joked about. He ran his small herd. He spoke to almost no one. 2 years went by in the way that years go by for a man who has decided to expect nothing, quiet and even, and emptied of weather. Then, on the last night of October, with the first true snow of the season coming down hard and early off the divide, somebody knocked at the iron-hinged door. The trailmen were not cruel about it, only careless, the way men are careless with another man's grief when it does not touch their own. They saw a finished cabin standing empty on a good ridge and a hard, quiet man living in half of it, and they made the story they could see, which was a widower's folly, and they were wrong in every particular, and it did not matter, because Jed never corrected them. Correcting them would have meant explaining, and explaining would have meant saying Alice's name aloud, and he had not said her name aloud in 2 years, and did not intend to start for the benefit of men passing on the high trail. The woman on the step was half frozen, and not Alice and entirely a stranger, and she was holding the reins of a horse that had gone lame, and she said, through teeth that would not quite stop, that she had lost the lower trail in the snow and seen his light, and would he, for the love of God, let her stand by his fire for an hour. He let her in. A man does not leave a soul in the snow over old grief, and Jed Mercer, for all his emptied years, was not built that way. He got her to the fire, and got coffee into her, and got the lame horse into the lean-to, and while he worked, he learned the bones of it. Her name was Ruth Avery. She was traveling to a teaching post in the valley town, 2 days late and badly guided, and the man who was to have brought her the last stretch had turned back at the first snow and left her to find it alone. "You'll not make the valley tonight," Jed said, "nor tomorrow if this keeps on. It can blow 3 days this kind." He heard how it landed, a strange man telling a strange woman she was snowed in alone with him, and he said the next part plain so there could be no fear in it. "There's a room. It has a door that bars from the inside. It's yours till the weather lets you go, and you'll come to no trouble from me. You have my word, for whatever a stranger's word is worth in the dark." Ruth Avery looked at him a long moment over the coffee, measuring him the way a woman alone learns to measure, and something in what she found let her shoulders down half an inch. "It's worth the having," she said. "Show me the room." He showed her the small room with the window facing the morning, the room he had built for Alice and never entered, and he did not tell her that, and he watched her set her wet bag on the bed he had bought for another woman 2 years gone, and he went back to the big room and sat by the fire a long time, unsettled in a way he had not been in years. He brought her dry blankets from his own bed and a pair of his wool socks, enormous on her, and he did it all with his eyes carefully elsewhere, the careful courtesy of a man who wanted her to feel no danger in her own helplessness. Ruth Avery had been afraid, climbing down off her exhaustion into a strange man's cabin in a storm. She had heard the stories every traveling woman heard. What she found instead was a man who handed her his socks and looked at the wall, and the fear went out of her by degrees, replaced by something she had not expected to feel that night, which was safety. And underneath the safety, faint and surprising, the first warmth of being looked after by someone who expected nothing for it. The storm did what he said it would. It closed over the ridge and stayed, and the world shrank to the cabin and the lean-to, and the rope he strung between them, so neither of them would be lost fetching wood. They fell, without discussing it, into the shape 2 people fall into when survival asks it. He hauled. She cooked, badly at first and then less badly, laughing at her own failures in a way that loosened something in the close air of the place. She was not a quiet woman, and the cabin had been a quiet place for 2 years, and her talk filled it the way water fills a dry creek bed, finding the old channels. She asked him things. No one had asked Jed Mercer things in a long while. She asked about the herd and the ridge and the forging of the door hinges, and he answered shorter than she liked, and then, by the second day, less short. And by the evening of the second day, she got a near whole sentence out of him about the satisfaction of iron worked right, and she treated that sentence like the gift it was. What she did not ask about was the small room. She had noticed, being observant, that he never crossed its threshold, that he handed her things at the door rather than stepping in, that the room was finished with a care the rest of the cabin lacked, the window placed just so, a shelf at a woman's height. She noticed and she said nothing, and her not asking was its own kindness, and Jed felt it as one. On the third day, she found the daguerreotype. It had slipped behind the shelf in the small room, face to the wall, and she turned it over, while dusting, and saw a young woman she did not know, and she understood the whole shape of the cabin in a single breath. She set it on the shelf, face out, and did not mention it, but that night by the fire she said gently, into the warm dark, who was she? The third day was the one that changed things, though neither of them marked it at the time. They had run out of easy talk and settled into the comfortable quiet of people who no longer need to fill every silence, and Ruth had taken up his torn shirts to mend because her hands wanted work, and Jed had watched her mend by the fire and felt the cabin become, for an hour, the thing he had built it to be. A place with a woman in it sewing by the light, and the feeling had been so sharp and so unexpected that he had gotten up and gone out to the lean-to in the cold, for no reason at all, just to be away from how much he had liked it. He told her. He had not told anyone, and he found, once he started, that the telling came easier than the silence had been. Alice, the letters, the land cleared and the walls raised, and the small room built for a woman who liked her coffee in the morning sun. The last letter from Ohio, the 2 years of expecting nothing, which he had called peace, and which Ruth, listening, plainly did not believe was peace. You built a whole room for a person who never set foot in it, Ruth said, when he was done, not unkindly. And then you locked yourself out of it for 2 years to punish her for not coming. To punish myself, Jed said, for building it. Same thing, in the end, she said. You decided wanting was a fool's game, and you've been living like a man who lost a bet he made with himself. She was quiet a moment. I know the trick. I came west because a man in Pennsylvania decided I wasn't the kind of woman a sensible man marries, and I believed him for a year, and then I got tired of living inside another person's low opinion, and I bought a ticket. The teaching post isn't the point. Getting out from under that opinion was the point. Jed looked at her across the fire. This stranger who had blown in out of the snow 3 days ago and somehow taken the exact measure of 2 years of his silence. You get out from under it, he asked. Working on it, she said. It helps to be somewhere a person doesn't already know all the reasons they decided not to want you. A ridge in a snowstorm, say. A stranger's fire. She let that sit. You could try the small room sometime, Jed Mercer. It's a good room. The morning comes into it just the way she wrote she'd like. Seems a waste, building that for love, and then leaving it to the dust out of spite. She had told him about Pennsylvania lightly, the way a person tells a thing they have decided not to let hurt them anymore. But Jed heard the weight under the lightness, because he carried the same kind himself. A man in her town, well off and well regarded, had courted her, and then, when she did not fall into his hand the way he expected, had let it be known that she was difficult, that there was something cold in her, that a sensible man should look elsewhere. It was a small cruelty, and a complete one. In a town that size, one well-regarded man's verdict was the whole jury. She had lived a year inside that verdict, before she understood that the only appeal was distance, and she had bought a ticket west, and made herself a teacher, and told no one, until a snowstorm and a stranger's fire, that the teaching post was really just the far side of an escape. The storm broke on the 4th morning, the way these storms do, all at once and silent, the world gone white and blinding and still. By noon, the lower trail would be passable. By evening, Ruth Avery could be in the valley town at her teaching post, in a boarding house with a proper bed, a stranger's snowbound days behind her like a dream half remembered. She packed her bag. He saddled her horse, sound again after 3 days' rest. They stood at the iron-hinged door he had forged for another woman's arrival, and the easy thing was for her to ride down to her real life and for him to go back to his quiet. And they both knew the shape of the easy thing, and neither of them moved toward it. "The valley town," Jed said, "is 8 miles. A teacher could ride it from here. Of a morning. It was the longest reach a man that careful had made in 2 years, and it cost him visibly, and he made it anyway." Ruth Avery looked at him, and at the cabin, and at the small room's window catching the new sun, and she did the arithmetic of her own life, the teaching post, and the boarding house, and the long climb out from under a Pennsylvania man's low opinion, against a forged door, and a quiet man, and a room built for love that was sitting empty in the morning light. A teacher could ride it, she agreed, or a teacher could keep her post in the valley and find she had reason to ride up the ridge of a Sunday, see how the room takes the morning, see if a man can learn to sit in it. There is a thing the trail men never knew, joking about the widower's folly. The cabin had not been built for a woman who never came. It had been built, it turned out, for a woman who came 2 years late, in a snowstorm, off the wrong trail, holding a lame horse, and walked into a stranger's fire and saw, faster than he could, what the place had always been for. Jed Mercer sat in the small room that next Sunday morning, with the coffee, watching the sun come up the way Alice had wanted to, and Ruth Avery one day would, and he found that the room had never really been about Alice at all. It had been about the wanting, and the wanting, it seemed, had only been waiting for the right snow. He did try the room, that 4th morning, while she was still sleeping. He stood in the doorway he had not crossed in 2 years, and made himself cross it, and the morning came in the window just exactly as he had built it to, gold and slow across the floor, and it did not hurt the way he had braced for. It only felt like waste, like a good thing left in the dark too long. And he understood, standing there in the gold light, that Ruth had been right, that he had been punishing the room for his own daring in building it, and that Alice, wherever she was in Ohio with her settled man, would not have wanted a room built in hope to molder in spite. He opened the window a crack to let the cold, clean air in, and he aired the room out, for the first time, on the morning the storm broke.